take your pencil case back to your sewing machine and have it facing, so the seam allowance is facing upwards, and we're going to have a look at it. And what we're going to do is we have to zigzag all the way along this seam edge here, and then all the way along this seam edge here, just separately. And that's to stop the threads from stop the seam allowance from fraying. See, the threads will just pull off and it will eventually fall apart. So we need to do a nice big wide zigzag right along the edge of the seam allowance, and that will stop it from fraying. So the first thing we need to do is change the stitch width. So we're going to change it from 0 up to 5, and we're going to change the stitch length from 3 up to 2. Okay. Just get this in position. So what we're going to do is you're just going to take the seam allowance on its own, so it's all by itself, and we're going to sit it under the presser foot, but instead of lining the edge of the fabric up with one of these lines, we're actually going to line it up with the inside edge of the foot there. You can just see the inside edge of the foot, because when we move our needle backwards and forwards, you'll see it goes from side to side, and that's what makes a zigzag. And we want the outside right hand side to sit right along the edge of the fabric. So what we're going to do is position it like this. Okay, you're going to have to hang on to those threads and help to pull the fabric through at the start, because one of the feed dogs isn't gripping the fabric, so the machine doesn't grip the fabric as well. You need to hang on to those threads. We don't need to backstitch for zigzag, but we do need to give it a good pull to help it through. And after about 6 stitches you should be able to let go, and all I'm doing is watching that my zigzag stays on the edge of my fabric like this. You can see the right hand side of the stitch runs right along the edge of the fabric like that. And we go all the way to the bottom. Make sure nothing else is caught up underneath, that it's just the seam allowance sitting there nice and flat. So go all the way along right down to the bottom. And stop, lift your presser foot, take your fabric out, cut your threads off immediately at the start and at the finish, like this. And you should have an edge that looks like that, all by itself. Then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to take, once I've threaded my needle back up again because I've just knocked it out. Oops. So we're going to take the other seam allowance, side of the seam allowance, once again all by itself, not stitching it to anything else, and we're going to position it under the presser foot so that the edge sits against the inside edge of the foot just there. Hang on to your threads to help pull through for about the first 6 or 7 stitches. I'm pulling, and then I can let go, and I make sure, every so often I just stop to make sure that there's nothing getting caught up under my sewing, that it's just the seam allowance that I'm stitching by itself. And I'll go right to the end once again. Stop, lift your presser foot, pull your threads out, pull your sewing out, cut your threads off one end, cut them off at the other, and you should have 2 zigzagged seam allowance pieces that are separate from each other.